What would happen if a quiet janitor stepped out of the shadows and saved an entire multi-million-dollar corporation with a talent no one ever saw coming? In the heart of bustling Chicago, where the lights of glass towers seem to swallow the sunset whole, the Polaris Grand Hotel rises like a majestic fortress of the elite. Here, every hallway is carpeted thick, every framed artwork a piece from an auction, and every server has memorized the perfect angle of a professional smile. But within this glimmering world, there is someone who walks unnoticed: Avery Morgan. At 28, her brown hair is tied neatly behind her neck. Her ill-fitting housekeeping uniform conceals eyes that have stayed up many nights, studying a language no one ever thought she would need. No one asks her about her past, nor do they wonder what drives a young woman like her, pushing a janitor's cart every day in worn shoes, to always carry a notebook filled with carefully handwritten Chinese characters. All they see is a quiet employee, soft-spoken, always taking late shifts, always slipping into the corners no one pays attention to. And perhaps because of that, no one knows that 3 years ago, Avery began teaching herself Chinese from an old book her mother, Lena Morgan, left behind before she passed away. Lena once said that if life gave her another chance, she would stand on the Great Wall of China, gaze at Renaissance paintings in Florence, or lose herself among the cherry blossoms in Kyoto just to be still. But cancer took that dream away forever. The night after the funeral, Avery opened the book her mother left behind, her fingers tracing the pages aged with time, and whispered, "I'll go for you." She had no money, no passport, not even a clue where to begin. But she had time, after work, before bed, and a quiet belief that sometimes learning a language is the only way to keep a lost loved one close. 3 years passed, and the outside world remained unaware. To her manager, Avery was just a useful shadow. To her co-workers, someone easy to boss around. But in her mind, every cleaning task was a memory drill. Every long hallway, a silent chapter to replay her mother's voice in the echoes of her mind. And then one day, when everything seemed destined to remain a secret, fate would call her name. In a way no one ever expected. Avery's apartment was barely larger than her bed, with a small window that overlooked a parking lot filled with weary sedans. She lived alone there. No cat, no plants, just an old wooden bookshelf and a photo of her and her mother beside a birthday cake on her 25th birthday. Her mother, Lena, had been a medical nurse who spent her life caring for others, but couldn't save herself. In her final days, she would often hold Avery's hand and whisper, "If I don't make it, you go in my place. See the world through my eyes, will you?" Avery had smiled weakly then, thinking it was just her mother's way of soothing fear. But after the funeral, when everyone had left and the apartment sank into silence, she found a Chinese language book under the dresser. Its pages were yellowed, the cover creased, and on the first page was a line her mother had written in shaky blue ink. "One day, I'll understand what they're saying." That night, Avery picked up her phone, downloaded a language app, and began with the first phrase, "Ni hao, wo jiao Avery." When the speaker pronounced it, she repeated it 10 times, underlining each character as if etching it into her skin. From then on, every night after her shift, she studied. Sometimes amid the clanking of old pipes, sometimes in the glow of streetlights seeping through the window. Each syllable brought her closer to her mother's unfinished dream. One evening, while practicing pronunciation, a neighbor knocked angrily on her door, thinking she was blasting a movie. Avery quietly apologized and closed the book, But once the door shut, she cried. Not from being scolded, but because for the first time, she realized that in fulfilling a promise to someone who was no longer there, she was completely alone. 3 years passed. Avery had read Tang Dynasty poetry, understood the cultural etiquette of gifting in Chinese business, and written a full letter in Mandarin. But all of it lived in notebooks no one read, in memories no one measured. She told no one, never shared online, never posted accomplishments. Because she wasn't learning to be praised, she was learning to hold on to something that still belonged to her mother, a promise left unfinished. And even if no one knew, Avery kept studying, as if each character, each sentence, each quiet dream was a small step toward the woman she had lost. At the Polaris Grand Hotel, there was an unspoken rule, never written down but known by heart. The quieter you are, the farther you'll be pushed away. Avery was the perfect example. Always punctual, cleaning every room spotless, taking on the hardest shifts. Yet her name never appeared on the Employee of the Month board, and no one remembered her when distributing staff meal tickets. To Sasha Ellery, the head of the events department, Avery was simply the girl who cleans the odd-numbered floors. And that day, during an emergency meeting to prepare for the Global Next International Summit, Sasha turned and assigned, "Send Morgan to the 19th floor. The Chinese guests don't need perfect English. Good enough." Her voice treated Avery less like a person and more like a piece of equipment. Avery stood at the back, her spine stiff, fingernails pressing into her palms. But she didn't react. She simply nodded, just like every other time. On the way to the elevator, a group of staff whispered, "She probably thinks knowing a few ni haos makes her a language expert." Another laughed. "Yeah, and I speak Italian because I've had pizza." The laughter echoed behind her. Avery didn't turn around, but something inside her cracked. The 19th floor was quiet, the teal-carpeted hallway curving gently like ocean waves. Each door bore a "Do Not Disturb" sign in 3 languages. Avery swiped her card to open the first room, set her cleaning cart aside, and began wiping down the desk. On it lay a business magazine featuring the face of Liam Chen, the youngest CEO of Global Next, under the headline, "A New Bridge to Asia." She flipped through it, reading every line in both languages, silently translating as if taking an exam no one had assigned. She knew she could contribute. She understood both sides, language and culture. But to someone like Sasha, all of that was just an unnecessary complication. And even as the sting of humiliation seeped into each step she took, Avery gripped the cleaning cloth tighter, like holding on to the last piece of dignity she had left. Because she knew no one was going to hand her an opportunity. She would have to wait for fate to stumble, and maybe then she'd find the space to rise. The old service elevator came to a gentle stop with a faint ding, and the doors opened to reveal a familiar figure, Mr. Doyle, the veteran night shift security guard at Polaris Grand. With his snow-white hair, a uniform worn thin at the shoulders, and eyes that always carried a quiet sense of understanding, he was the only person in the entire hotel who had ever asked Avery, "Did you have dinner tonight?" It didn't take much. Just that single question was enough to remind her she was still human. Today was no different. He leaned against the wall, holding a disposable coffee cup, and smiled. "Heard you got assigned to the 19th floor." Avery gave a slight nod, trying to keep her voice steady. "Because the guests don't speak English well." Doyle furrowed his brow, but said nothing at first. After a pause, he set his cup down and said, Listen, Avery. You've got something most people spend a lifetime searching for. Inner strength. But you live like you're just a shadow. The world doesn't magically see what we keep hidden. If you don't speak up, your talent will rot in silence. Avery reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small notebook, opening it to reveal pages filled with carefully written Chinese characters. Doyle looked at them quietly, then sighed. It's beautiful, and no one knows. Avery hesitated. I just learned it for myself. Doyle shook his head. Skill doesn't need a megaphone, but it shouldn't be buried under your bed either. Let the world see, at least once, what you've spent your youth preserving. After he walked away, Avery remained standing in the elevator, both hands clenched around her slim notebook. Her mind was tangled with questions. Had she spent her whole life building a box that no one had locked, yet she herself had never dared to open? She shook her head and let out a dry laugh. Tomorrow would pass like any other day, she told herself. But what she didn't know was that tomorrow would be unlike any day she had ever known. The morning of the international summit began with the hurried rhythm of high heels tapping on marble floors, rushed instructions echoing through the hallways, and the scent of fresh coffee drifting across the grand lobby. On the 19th floor, where the Chinese delegation was staying, things were quiet, with only staff moving silently between rooms, adjusting thermostats, replacing towels, and checking the lighting. Avery was quickly finishing her round along the eastern corridor so she could get to the VIP conference room before 11 a.m. Everything was moving in perfect sequence until she stepped into the waiting lounge on the 19th floor. Its one-way glass looking out over the heart of the city. Behind a partially closed door, a man's voice rang out in English, urgent and worried. No, that's not what I said. Please don't misunderstand. This is the revised agreement. Is anyone here fluent in Chinese? I need a translator now. Avery froze, her hand tightening around the handle of her mop, heart pounding as if it had been yanked out of her chest. Through the narrow gap in the door, she recognized the man. It was Liam Chen, the CEO featured on the magazine cover just days earlier. His blazer was slung over a chair, and he kept running his hand through his hair, visibly distressed. We spent 3 months negotiating this deal. We can't lose it over a language miscommunication. His voice grew more desperate. Avery gripped the handle of her cart and stepped back. She knew she could help. The words echoed in her head, like familiar lines from a script she had practiced countless times. But the thought of stepping forward, standing in front of a CEO, while wearing a housekeeping uniform, and speaking a language no one expected her to know, it made her hesitate. She turned away, reaching for the elevator button, about to do what she had done so many times before. Remain silent. But in that moment, she caught her reflection in the glass. Small, boxed in, fading into the background. And suddenly, her mother's face appeared in her mind, a silent reminder. Avery turned around, stepped toward the half-open door. Excuse me. I speak Chinese. I can help if you'd like. Her voice trembled, soft but steady. Liam looked up, astonished to see that the person before him wasn't an assistant or a professional interpreter, but a young woman in a housekeeping uniform, her hands still carrying the scent of cleaning solution. Liam looked at Avery, visibly confused. She wasn't who he had in mind. But urgency outweighed doubt, and he held out his phone. The CEO in China is about to hang up. This is the final meeting before the contract is signed. Avery nodded, taking the phone in both hands as if it might shatter if she let herself tremble any further. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then spoke. "Hello. I am the interpreter. Please go ahead." On the other end, a man's voice came through, fast-paced and formal. Avery didn't just understand, she responded instantly. She explained the situation to Liam in English, then translated his message back into Mandarin. Financial terms, contractual clauses, the spirit of cooperation, every concept was conveyed clearly and smoothly. At first her voice wavered, but within minutes it became steady, flowing like water over stone. From the other side of the line, the Shanghai executive began to laugh, and the tension in the room eased. After 15 taut minutes, the call ended with a sentence Avery would never forget. "Thank you. You've saved a valuable opportunity that no one else could." She handed the phone back, gave a slight bow, and said quietly, "I'm sorry for interrupting. I should return to my duties now." Before Liam could respond, she was already walking away, her face flushed, feet seemingly floating above the floor. She didn't dare stay longer, afraid that if anyone in the hotel saw her in that moment, everything would snap back to its old order. But inside her, something had already shifted. The next morning, Avery returned to the hotel unsure whether she was nervous or simply anxious. She had tried to convince herself that what happened yesterday would pass like a breeze, that Liam wouldn't remember her, that she would remain just a room attendant, and that would be enough. But as she stepped into the ground floor meeting room, she saw Liam already there, accompanied by 2 senior hotel managers and a team of assistants. His gaze swept across the room and paused where Avery stood, tucked behind the door. "Actually," he said to everyone, "there's something special I need to mention. Yesterday, a staff member of this hotel saved a multi-million-dollar contract with outstanding language skills." No one said a word. From across the room, Sasha scoffed. "There must be some mistake. None of our staff speaks Chinese." Liam looked directly at Avery. "You're Morgan, right? Would you mind translating a few lines for me in front of everyone?" Avery froze. All eyes turned to her, like stage lights falling on a role she had never rehearsed. But after a breath drawn deep, she stepped forward. Liam spoke in English, about expansion strategies, about collaborative vision, and she translated into Mandarin, fluent and confident. The room fell so silent you could hear the collective breath of surprise. When it ended, Liam smiled. "Better than many professional interpreters I've hired." Sasha murmured, "I didn't know. She never mentioned anything." Liam replied, "Maybe because no one ever asked." In that moment, Avery understood that what makes people invisible isn't that they're not good enough. It's that no one ever takes the time to listen to the story they carry. Liam looked at Avery quietly after her translation, as if weighing something deeper than the words she had just spoken. At last he stepped forward, his voice gentle but resolute. "I'd like to invite you to join my team. We're expanding into the Asian market, and I need someone who not only speaks the language, but also understands the subtleties of communication. It would start as a cultural liaison role, and if things go well, it could become a full-time position at Global Nex." The room fell still for a beat. Avery stood there, her hands still slightly trembling. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the disbelief that she was hearing such an offer in the very place where she had once been, just a quiet figure pushing a cleaning cart down the hallway. But before she could speak, Sasha interrupted, still outwardly composed, but with a sharp glint in her eyes. "Liam, while I am impressed by what just happened, I must remind you that she has no formal qualifications, no executive experience, and no professional training to represent an international company." Her tone placed Avery right back into the bottom tier Sasha always believed she belonged to. Liam turned to Avery. I'm not choosing you because of a degree. I'm choosing you because you did what no one else dared to do. Stand up at the right moment, for the right reason. When all the experts stayed silent, you were the one who acted. Avery looked at him, then around the room. There were eyes filled with admiration, others with doubt. But she no longer felt afraid. I accept, she said. I want to try walking the path I've always believed I wasn't good enough for. In that moment, she was no longer the girl being summoned with a dismissive tone. She was the one choosing her own future, with the hands and belief no one had ever handed her. 3 weeks later, Avery Morgan arrived at the Global Next headquarters in Chicago to attend orientation for the Asia Market Strategy team. The borrowed suit jacket from her roommate's sister fit awkwardly at the shoulders. The second-hand heels pinched her feet slightly, but her eyes carried the look of someone fully ready. For the first time in her life, she sat at a table where people asked, "What do you think?" instead of, "Could you clean room 210? Liam led the meeting, presenting plans to open a representative office in Shanghai. After his presentation, he turned to Avery. Morgan, what are your thoughts on this approach? The entire room turned to her. She gripped her pen, breathed steadily, and began in a calm, even voice. Chinese business culture places great importance on relationships before contracts. We're leading with numbers and speed, but they assess goodwill and trust through every small action. As she spoke, the looks directed at her were no longer skeptical. They were attentive. When the meeting ended, Miranda, the head of strategy, approached her. Well done. We'll need your passport. Do you have one? Avery smiled softly, realizing it was the first time anyone had asked her that question. Never had one, she replied. Miranda nodded. Then let's get started. You're a vital part of this trip. On her way home, Avery looked up at the skyscrapers that once made her feel small. Today, they didn't seem quite so tall anymore. 1 year later, in the very lobby of the Polaris Grand Hotel, once a place that made Avery want to disappear every time she walked in, she now stood at the podium. This time, not with a cleaning rag or a janitor's cart, but as the Director of Asian Market Development at Global Next. I used to believe I was invisible, she began, her voice clear and resonant, because no one ever asked what I knew. No one saw what I did after hours, or understood why I whispered Chinese phrases to myself in the break room. But I was wrong, not because they didn't see me, but because I never dared to let myself be seen. She held up an old notebook, the one filled with the handwritten characters she had studied in the dark. My mother once dreamed of seeing the world. She never had the chance, but I did. And I went for her, because of her, and for myself. In the audience below, Liam nodded. Doyle, now head of security at the Chicago Museum of Art, smiled from where he leaned against a marble column, watching the young woman he once told, "Don't let your talent die in silence," now standing radiant in the spotlight. After the speech ended, a young woman in a housekeeping uniform approached her. Ms. Avery, your story makes me want to learn Japanese. Avery took her hand and smiled. Then learn it. And if one day you decide to step into the light, remember this. The world won't wait for you to be ready, but you always have the right to choose your moment. The girl nodded, her eyes shining. Avery turned away, her gaze lifting to the massive glass window that looked over the city. Today, she was no longer looking at the world through a window. She was living in it. And for the first time, she knew her journey was only just beginning. In this world, there are talents that do not lie in degrees, and there are great individuals who do not emerge from boardrooms, but from the quietest hallways of a building. The difference does not lie in where you begin, but in the moment you dare to believe that you deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be chosen. If Avery's story made you reflect on your own journey, please like this video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more inspiring paths like this, and leave a comment with the phrase, "Dare to rise." Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage today could become the greatest turning point of your life.